one of the things Frank and I have talked about, and I think we have these aspirations that there's a way to fix Class D housing in America. Okay. And I'm going to ask you a big question, but you seem more qualified than us. So I want your insight, right? So we have A, B, C, and D class of houses out there, right? A, I always say, are where the doctors live. B is where the teachers live. C is where the plumbers live. And D is where, could be dangerous at night, right? And generally, as real estate investors, we're told stay away from Class D houses, right? Like management intensive, you're going to have to go through evictions. A lot of times those houses aren't going to appraise, so just stay away from them. And that's fine, right? But Frank and I have talked a bunch about like, what if there is a solution to inject cash into some of these communities and help some of these communities turn around? So how do you think, this is my big question time, how do you think America can tackle some of the Class D issues with housing in real estate investing and lending? Do you have any big thoughts there?
Big question, man. No, I do have some thoughts. I think, so for me, it was a very fine line between Class C and Class D, where I was investing. I felt Class C, it was kind of on the border of some areas that would definitely be Class D. And the only reason that this model worked really well for me is because there was government intervention, really. I mean, that the rent rates were artificially much higher than they would have been had I rented to a market rate tenant. And that was because most landlords, heard homeless veteran and they just automatically said no, because PTSD, alcohol, drugs, whatever they thought was going to come into their house. And so they didn't want to do it. And so they had to incentivize landlords to do it with a little bit higher rent rate. Without any government intervention, I think it would be very difficult. But even with government intervention, I don't think it's necessarily like I was doing it because I had a passion for helping vets. There's other landlords that would do it and do the absolute bare minimum on the house to get it to pass the safety standards and get a homeless vet in there. And then they just collected a check. So I think, I think it's, obviously, if it was an easy answer, it would have already been solved. But I think it's a much bigger structural issue in terms of, there needs to be a lot of work before it gets to that point. Because once it's Class D, the price points are at a point where even if you rehab it, it's worth way less than what you're putting into it. So that's why these places just sit there. If there was value in it, it wouldn't matter how dangerous it is. There's investors that would go in there, but if you're buying a house for 20 grand and you put 50 grand into it to rehab it and it's worth 30 grand, then it just doesn't, the economics don't make sense. So that's why the government jumps in and tries to get involved. But, I think it's got to go back to why did it become a Class D, area in the first place, and start to address those issues, which are a lot of times family issues and other issues that lead to that place, instead of trying to address the manifestation of those issues.
Thanks for listening to the Virtual Real Estate Investing Podcast, presented by Greyline Investments, where we talk about how to find, fund, and finish deals from anywhere in the world.